Hello, I'm Patricia, and I currently live in a small annex attached to my in-laws' house with my husband, Willie. Although I have made the annex into a cozy living space, Willie resides in the main house with his parents. This annex, originally a modest project by Willie's grandfather meant to serve as a personal retreat, has been transformed into a functional room, all thanks to my efforts. For the first 4 years of our marriage, I lived in a regular apartment, but then his parents, who are quite fond of him, unexpectedly expressed their desire for him to come home. Moved by their tears and hugs, and feeling a sense of duty as a son, Willie decided to return to his childhood home. I was taken aback by their emotional display, and it left me feeling overwhelmed. Willie and I met at work, where he started as my subordinate after midway through his career. We dated for 4 years while he lived with his parents, which seemed to deepen the nostalgia he felt for them. Even after our marriage, Willie's upbringing, characterized by being coddled and little involvement in household chores, seemed to pull him back to the comfort of home. When I suggested we share household chores, Willie was hesitant, admitting he had never really done such tasks. Although I hoped for a more equitable division of responsibilities, he had never thought about contributing. I noticed a pattern. Whenever I tried to engage him in chores, he would momentarily feign interest but quickly backtrack, saying, "This isn't for me, Patricia. You're better at it. You should just handle it." We both worked full-time, but since I held a higher position at my job, I felt a greater responsibility to share the domestic duties. However, encouraging Willie to pitch in often proved more exhausting than simply taking care of everything myself, so I eventually resigned myself to managing all the tasks alone. Our dynamic shifted when I started working remotely. At first, Willie was surprised to see me at home every day, and I thought he was adapting to this new arrangement. But as time went on, it became evident that he hadn't fully grasped what my working from home involved. A few years later, his parents made an unexpected visit to our apartment, expressing a desire to live closer to him. Their emotional reunion left me feeling isolated and confused. Ultimately, out of respect for Willie's wish to be nearer to his parents, we made the decision to move into their home. Throughout our relationship, Willie had always chosen locations near his parents, whether it involved renting an apartment or selecting a job for me. Since I worked remotely, the location didn't matter to me, but Willie's choices often meant we had to uproot ourselves and sometimes even quit our jobs. Upon moving in, Willie's mother expressed her heartfelt gratitude, saying, "Thank you for taking care of Willie all this time. From now on, I'll take good care of him. Patricia, you can handle everything else." Initially, I thought this meant I would be relieved of the daily chores concerning Willie, but I soon discovered her intentions were quite different. My mother-in-law took it upon herself to cater to Willie's every need. She prepared special meals just for him, washed and ironed his clothes, kept his shoes and belongings in pristine condition, and purchased personal items exclusively for him. Meanwhile, all other household chores, including cooking and laundry for his parents and myself, fell solely on my shoulders. Despite my full-time job commitments, I found myself overwhelmed with the responsibility of maintaining not just our living space but also the larger family home. This new living arrangement left me feeling disheartened. While it seemed to bring joy to Willie and his parents, I saw no real benefits for myself. In fact, my responsibilities appeared to have multiplied. During one of my cleaning sessions, my father-in-law approached me with a hesitant request. He looked apologetic as he said, "Patricia, I have a favor to ask. Could you contribute some money?" Confused, I asked him to elaborate. He admitted that he found it difficult to ask Willie for financial help, explaining, "Willie has worked hard, and it feels challenging to ask him for contributions." This revelation added complexity to our living dynamics, exposing the uneven distribution of both chores and financial responsibilities. Willie and I had previously agreed to share expenses like our apartment rent and other living costs. However, During our shopping trips, he often persuaded me to cover various items, non-essential ingredients, alcohol, clothes, and accessories. Whenever I expressed reluctance, he would react childishly, accusing me of being stingy. Despite these financial disagreements, I took some comfort in the fact that, aside from these issues, Willie didn't interfere much with my daily life. However, that fragile peace shattered when we began living together in his parents' house. Unlike Willie, his mother actively disrupted my routine. She frequently interrupted my work from home, insisting I prioritize household chores over my professional duties. At times, she would barge into my room and tug on my clothing, making it nearly impossible for me to concentrate on my tasks. Frustrated, I decided to discuss the issue with Willie, half expecting him to side with his mother. To my surprise, he listened attentively and promised to talk to her about the interruptions. I was hopeful for a compromise that would address both our needs. Little did I know that Willie's idea of a compromise was far from what I envisioned. He suggested relocating me to the annex, a separate structure on their property, indicating a new level of separation rather than integration. One day, somewhat jokingly, I approached Willie with a question about the annex, asking if I could demolish it and build a new house in its place. To my astonishment, he casually replied, "You can even demolish it and build a new house if you want." His casual remark opened up unexpected possibilities for our living arrangement, hinting at a level of autonomy I hadn't anticipated. Taking his words to heart, I promptly began remodeling the annex to suit my tastes. As I cleaned, renovated, and changed the wallpaper, I noticed that Willie never once came to check on my progress. As I transformed the annex, it became increasingly clear that Willie had no intention of living there with me. This realization hit me hard. Within the family trio, I was the outsider. There were moments when I found myself home alone while they went out for barbecues or when I had to work late and missed shared meals. These outings, often orchestrated by Willie's mother, felt deliberately planned to exclude me, as if she were hoping I would leave her son. Despite this, Willie had given me complete freedom with the annex, and I embraced the opportunity to make the space my own. I dove into DIY projects, installing new shelves and personalizing every nook and cranny. Interestingly, after I moved out, neither Willie nor his parents ever visited the annex. They must have known about the renovations, yet they showed no interest in what I was doing, reinforcing the feeling that I was no longer considered part of the family. Living away from the main house, especially without Willie's mother constantly around, I began to relish my newfound independence. It felt almost like living alone, which was surprisingly liberating. I took comfort in knowing that being in the annex kept her from interfering with my work. During the renovations, I even installed new locks and improved the security, marking the annex as my sanctuary away from the family dynamics. I made sure that no one, not even Willie or his parents, could enter without my permission. This newfound privacy made me reconsider whether this separation might actually be a blessing in disguise. However, it seemed my mother-in-law had already sensed my growing detachment and wasn't about to let me find peace easily. Unable to tolerate her behavior any longer, I found myself at a crossroads, contemplating my next steps. As I settled into the renovated annex, her desperation to drive me away became increasingly apparent. Her subtle harassment began with small annoyances, like leaving trash outside my cabin instead of at the collection site. Sometimes, she would host barbecues in the garden, deliberately omitting me from the guest list while ensuring the tantalizing smell of grilled meat wafted my way. Despite her efforts, I couldn't help but smile at the futility of her attempts to push me out. Then one day, she summoned me to the main house under the pretense of offering leftover meat and potatoes. Sensing there was more to her invitation, I reluctantly obliged. Upon my arrival, I found her alone in the living room. With dramatic flair, she placed a single piece of paper on the table, a divorce paper. It was evident that her true motive was to thrust this document upon me. Knowing that Willie would comply without question if she instructed him to proceed, all that was left was for me to agree, and Willie and I could be officially divorced by simply submitting the paper to the city court. With a smug expression, his mother declared, "Isn't it about time you gave up? There's no reason for you and Willie to stay married anymore. Get out, you freeloading unemployed woman." I was taken aback by her audacity, but her certainty only fueled my resolve. Thrilled at the prospect of freedom, I eagerly grabbed the divorce paper and exclaimed, "I'm going to the city court right now." "Thank you so much." My mother-in-law, who likely expected me to resist the divorce, was left speechless by my unexpected enthusiasm. After submitting the divorce papers at the city court, I wasted no time packing my belongings. Feeling it was necessary to inform Willie's mother about the finalized divorce, I headed to the main house. There, I told her the process had been successful. Regarding the annex I had renovated, I informed her that I would leave it as it was and that she was free to demolish it or use it as she pleased. My positive attitude about leaving seemed to surprise even my mother-in-law, who, despite her apparent happiness about my departure, wished me luck on the day I left. As Willie and his father realized I was genuinely leaving, they expressed their concern. "Are you really going? What will we do without Patricia?" I smiled and thanked them for allowing me to use the cabin, explaining that since there was no point in staying married any longer, and now that we were divorced, it was time for me to move on. While I organized my belongings, I completed my move to a luxury apartment, a change I had been contemplating for quite some time. Not long after settling into my new place, my mother-in-law called. Her tone was somewhat awkward as she began. "Patricia," I answered cheerfully, eager to keep things light. "What's up? How's everything going with the cabin?" However, she quickly shifted to a more serious topic, mentioning finances. Specifically, she brought up that Willie had informed her I was giving his father $5,000 a month. Confirming her statement, I clarified that, contrary to her earlier accusations of me being an unemployed freeloader, I was, in fact, gainfully employed. Her surprise was palpable over the phone. She had thought I had left my job entirely. I quickly set the record straight, explaining that I hadn't merely quit my previous position, but had moved on to become the president of a new company. This company was pioneering a remote work system, positioning itself at the forefront of modern work environments. Her reaction was a mix of disbelief and confusion, prompting an exasperated sigh from me. It struck me that Willie, too, was unaware of my professional ascent, which underscored the growing distance between us, not just physically, but also in our perceptions of each other. Since moving in with his parents, it had become evident that he never fully embraced his role as a husband. She then inquired about my earnings, curious if my new position had also resulted in a salary boost. I casually mentioned that it was roughly around $3 million. While this figure was an exaggeration, a simplification to avoid delving into the complexities of my actual earnings, her eyes lit up with intrigue. "With that much money, could you lend us some? Your father-in-law was laid off, and he kept it hidden. We've been managing somehow with the $5,000 you've been giving us, and neither Willie nor I were aware of his job loss." This revelation shed light on a previous conversation with my father-in-law, where he mentioned how humiliating it felt to ask his son for financial help. I now understood that his earlier words had been a facade, likely a strategic move to elicit support from me, banking on the assumption that my superior professional status implied substantial wealth. While cunning, this maneuver painted a clearer picture of the financial dynamics within Willie's family and their expectations of me. At our former company, they had subtly maneuvered to extract $5,000 a month from me under the guise of shared expenses. In hindsight, I didn't mind too much at the time because it allowed me to live peacefully in the quiet cabin. But now, being divorced from Willie, I saw no ties binding me to his family anymore. When I pointed out this disconnect, My mother-in-law urgently pleaded. That's not true. To me and Willie, you're still family. Please come back to us. I immediately declined, fully aware of the potential for exploitation once more. Re-entering a relationship with Willie offered no benefits. We were now strangers, and it felt uncomfortable for them to still claim me as family, especially since they were the ones who had pushed me out in the first place. I was genuinely enjoying my life on my own. It felt much like when I was married, mostly living alone, but this time, I was spending money on myself instead of watching $5,000 siphoned away each month. I much preferred my current life. With a firm goodbye, I ended the call without hesitation, puzzled as to why they thought I would ever consider returning. For my mother-in-law, it seemed to be a last-ditch effort. The reality was that Willie's salary wasn't impressive, and he consistently avoided responsibilities, often saying, "I can't do it," and passing tasks on to others. This trait, evident in both his personal and professional life, rendered him unreliable. He remained a regular employee without any salary advancements. With his father laid off and his mother as a housewife, they struggled to maintain their large house and eventually had to sell it. Now, all three of them were living in the cabin I had renovated. While it was just right for one person, it must be cramped and uncomfortable for three. Since then, I hadn't given them much thought and continued to embrace my life peacefully, savoring the solitude and freedom that came with my newfound independence.